There we go. So for anyone who can't make it, we will record it anyway and carry on. Kirsty, if you can let people in as we go, that'd be great. If anyone does turn up. So thank you all for joining us. Um, Normally this is the bit where I introduce my lovely colleague David, but unfortunately he is working with one of our clients. It's a very dedicated man, so you are just getting me solo this time. My name is Charlotte. I am the owner and director of the HR department in Coventry. And today we are covering inclusion and recruitment and how to make your workplace as inclusive as possible. We want to try and remove some biases. We want to put some easy ways or simple ways to get it as part of your onboarding process. Because, I'm a firm believer in, if we start from an inclusive position when we're recruiting, we end up with a much more diverse and interesting workforce, and that benefits everybody hugely. Some points on the workplace culture or bits that might hinder us, and then we'll finish with some easy little practical steps that you can implement straight away. Nothing too disastrous, too difficult. What I will say is we've tried to keep the topic as narrow as possible because much like the topics we cover, I could probably fill an hour of this. So if you do have any questions or any specifics or anything that you like, any things you're desperate for, please pop them in the chat as we're going along. There is a section at the end for doing Q&As. If it's something a bit more I was going to say personal, but a bit more confidential, then feel free to reach out to one of us at the end. We can always have a chat about that offline rather than bringing it up in this. But like I say, we're going to try and keep this one quite focused, quite narrow, but it is a huge topic, and I will try and do it justice today. Those of you who are new, I do have a tendency to waffle, so Kirsty will give me a little sign at the 20 when we're at the 20-minute mark, just to make sure that I don't overrun too much, because again, I could talk for English. So we're starting with building inclusion, recruitment to retention. So like I said, I am a firm believer in creating an inclusive workplace. It
Yeah,
benefits
not a problem. So I might just go straight into the email. No
oh,
issues.
Kirsty, me, whoever that was.
Y-
Um,
Yeah,
we all benefit from an inclusive workplace. And you need that breadth and depth of not just actual physical work experience, but lived life experience as well. If you've ever worked somewhere where it's a bit more narrow, shall we say, I'll try not to be too preachy about it. You get the same sort of thinking. You need other people. You need people with lived experiences from all walks of life to be able to move your business forward. There's a saying: if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. So if we're not bringing anything new, we're not going to get anything new from it. So we want to attract diverse talent. We want to recruit as fairly as possible. There are hundreds and hundreds of horror stories of recruitment gone wrong, whether that's intentionally or unintentionally. I'm sure there'll be a point I can share a couple as we're going along. Onboarding inclusively as well. So it's not just thinking about the recruitment process and how people are coming to us. It's also once we've got them and we think we've got a good person, how do we induct them into our business so that they feel part of the team, they feel included, they don't feel tokenistic or like they're just there to tick a box or to up the numbers, and we keep that culture running. Because if we have, sure, you've all worked places throughout your careers, that are good and are bad, and you tend to remember the bad ones. The ones that feel really toxic tend to be the ones that stick in your brain because you're like, ugh, I am glad I am out of there. So why inclusion matters. There is always a business case for it. We want that wider talent pool. The more we are casting our nets, the more brilliant people that we can find. We start limiting it to, a great example is limiting your recruitment to people, whether that's consciously or unconsciously, under a certain age. We start to think, oh, well, actually, if they're in their 60s, are they looking to retire? Or are we on the opposite end? If they're very young people, they're not really looking for a stable, committed job. They're not going to be as, bought into working for the company for a long time. And actually, you're missing people out just by cutting off the ends of the spectrum there. It improves employee engagement. If you've ever worked somewhere where you've got a broad lot of people, it's always a lot more fun. People bring their own stuff to the business. We want to increase retention. That's a really big one. Recruitment is so hard at the moment. Kirsty and I done a lot of recruitment together over the years, and it's definitely, Kirsty can nod to this one, it's getting harder. It is tough out there. The good people aren't leaving businesses because they're concerned about, people don't want to leave good places, which means you end up with a kind of bad, well, not bad, but just mediocre people who are just kind of floating around. So we want to keep people. Retention is a huge one. Um, Innovation and collaboration. Like I said, we like that melting pot. We like the ideas. Not everyone has been to university. Not everybody has the same level of understanding of stuff. Not everyone has the same life skills, but we all bring something. We all bring different things to the table, and those shouldn't be a disqualifier from anything. We want to keep that employer brand going. If you're a good place to work, it tends, and people stay there a long time, it says a lot about your business. And better outcomes. We all want better outcomes. We like it. Number goes up, everyone's happy. So what are we looking at when we're dealing with the recruitment process? So the recruitment process is huge. We think about things like the Equality Act. There are so many areas where we can fall foul of not being inclusive because we're not thinking about even simple things like, where are we putting the adverts? Are we specifically getting out into places where younger people might see them, older people might see them, people of color might see them? Are we getting them out into as many places as possible, or are we just putting it in the one place that we always put it on and we always get the same sort of people from? Application processes. We've been using an ATS system, and generally, for the most part, those are fairly kind of blind. We don't tend to have photos listed because you want to take that person based on their CV and based on the skills that they're bringing, rather than, a conscious or unconscious bias that you may have. And again, with the shortlisting decisions, are we looking at people and disqualifying them for reasons that are your own perception of it? Again, I will use that age one. If somebody's, clearly been in the workforce a long time, they've got a long, big CV, their education was back, a few years ago. Are we going, oh, actually, they're probably too old? Are they going to be very committed? Are they going to be leaving in a couple of years? That's something you're probably thinking in your head without really realizing. That's what unconscious bias is. So there's a big overlap between avoiding making discriminatory, and you probably don't even realize they're discriminatory decisions, which would fall foul of the Equality Act, and opening up inclusion within your recruitment process. And the same with interview techniques and the selection criteria. All of these things you could apply any kind of brush to. For things like disability, if you've got somebody who's visually impaired, where are we putting those job adverts? Are those job ads, have you given them a sense check? Have you put them through? There are certain software that you can use that make sure that for visually impaired people it reads properly with their electronic readers, making sure we're not adding things like emojis, because apparently that really screws up electronic readers. And then how are we getting people in? Are we doing remote interviews? If we're doing in-person interviews, have we double checked if there is anything that person needs to help them? I know of this is going to be the first anecdote of the day. I worked with a business who interviewed somebody, realized in the online interview that she was a wheelchair user, and then was disqualified her from going forwards, even though she was immensely qualified, because their office was up a flight of stairs and they didn't have a lift. And what came to pass when she made a complaint was actually she uses a wheelchair, but she can also walk. So she would have been able to go stairs for her working day and sit at her desk and go to the toilet. What she couldn't do was run a marathon, for example. So they hadn't asked that question. They hadn't even bothered to get to that stage. They decided that because she was in a wheelchair, that she couldn't do. That was it. That was their stairs. That was it. So, I put on there, small barriers can have a big impact. So that is a really easy one. Okay, yeah, it may have felt uncomfortable to ask the question, but actually there's a way of saying, hey, our office is upstairs. Would you be able to make it upstairs? If not, can we meet you somewhere else? There were options available, but they just made that quick decision, probably without even realizing the impact that it could be having. And actually they could have lost a really good candidate, somebody bringing a wealth of experience, because they made that quick snap decision. So how do we make a more inclusive recruitment process? So inclusive language in the job adverts. I know it's an old one, and if you've been to any of my equal rights, equal opportunities webinars where we talk about the Equality Act, there are some things that are just ingrained in our language that we forget exclude other people. So, for example, things like saying fireman. I recently took my daughter and some other kids to the fire station, and I found myself using the word fireman because there were some men there and they were firemen, but actually they're firefighters because women can do that too. So we shouldn't be limiting that language. The same as, if you're looking for security, if you run a bar or an event, you're looking for door people, security people. You're not looking for doormen. Whereas that's the language, it always tends to be skewed to men, which kind of disqualifies anybody who doesn't necessarily fall on that male spectrum all the way up to women. So we could just say people, person, nice and neutral. We want to focus on the skills and experience. It's too easy to look at a CV and focus on, oh, where did they go to school? Oh, was it somewhere in Europe rather than being in England? Was it, how many years ago was it? Blah, 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 blah. Have they not been to university? And you'd prefer somebody who had been to university, despite the fact this person has the other skills. So we need to think about all of those things, because when we start adding qualifiers to stuff, we start excluding people, whether that's intentionally or unintentionally. And again, with skills and qualifications and stuff, there is always going to be a certain standard, certain level that you need. But actually, are you also adding on extra bits for yourself or what you perceive you need? The interview questions, we want them to be really standard, almost not necessarily boring, but they need to be the same for everybody, because you want to judge everybody on the same measure. And the same with the objectives. How are we scoring people? Do we need to make adjustments? If somebody has, maybe got some sort of impairment or something that they maybe need a bit more help with, are we going to judge them at the same level as somebody else? Especially if their job is not necessarily to be doing job interviews every single day. So, if somebody is doing, for example, computer programming, the computer program doesn't care how that person is, how that person speaks, where that person came from, what that person's beliefs are. It doesn't, computer just does computer. So we need to think about those things. And again, that might be the bingo word for the day, Kirsty, is, are we adding our own things to it? Are we adding our own unconscious bias to it without even realizing? Offer reasonable adjustments. I keep banging on about it, but it's very easy to ask simple questions. Do you need anything for the meeting to come in person? I've worked with people. When I worked for Tesco, I worked with a lovely lady who was hard of hearing, and she had with her a sign language interpreter for the kind of day-to-day stuff. So she could lip read, but that was only, you work with customers. Those of you who work with the general public know that people are rude, people are busy, people are not thinking. So she had a sign language interpreter with her for when she needed to speak to people where she couldn't necessarily lip read, or they couldn't necessarily understand her because her language was not as fluent and as easy to understand as somebody else potentially. I could understand it, but not everybody could. So that's an easy adjustment. Like, can I bring so-and-so who can interpret for me? Yeah, sure, not a problem. And I think a big one is training your managers on that unconscious bias. I keep banging on about it because it's so easy to slip into. You know your life and your experiences and how you've been, and your employees and their experiences and how they've got on. And sometimes even without realizing, you want to get a new person. I need a new Joan. I just want somebody exactly like Joan. Joan was this, Joan was that, Joan was that. And then I'm looking at the CV, go, well, that person's not Joan, that person's not right, that person's not right. And actually, I could easily be missing something, because you want somebody who is trainable, who's teachable, who is keen, is willing. You want those things as well. Those sort of almost softer skills are things you need. The training, you can train people to do most things. It's those other bits that are harder. So where are we on the list? So we are looking at onboarding. So we've got the recruitment process down. We've been able to attract a great widespread range of candidates. We've interviewed them. We've made sure we're not excluding anybody unnecessarily. You've offered them a job, they've accepted. Woo! That's Now we're on to the onboarding. And this is as key, I think, as the recruitment, because you can do an amazing recruitment process and then you get to onboarding and you've gone, oh, yeah, I was gonna set something up and then I forgot, and we got the laptop in, but I haven't even opened it, and like I think I've chucked some pens on her desk. It'll probably be fine. Like, don't worry about it. And actually, you've worked that hard to get the person. You want to keep that momentum going, and part of being part of a team and feeling included, no matter who you are, is the onboarding. The onboarding is where you kind of set up the shop for people. You say, this is what we believe, this is who we are as a business. And actually, if their first experience is a really shoddy, rushed together or not thought through onboarding, that's not going to make people feel welcome, is it? That's not going to make them feel important. And yeah, they need to bring some stuff because they're coming to you to work, but equally, you want them to stay. We talked about earlier, recruitment is hard. Recruitment is a slog at the moment. So if you can make your life a little bit easier by making people feel included, important, welcome in the business, then we should do it. On the screen, we've got all of the things that we want to help process it. We want them, keep saying, feel welcome, understand what's expected of them. The amount of times I have conversations with clients about new employees who are going to fail their probation period because they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I'm like, have you really set out, like in plain, simple English, what you are expecting of them? Because what they're expecting and you're expecting, what they were expecting or think you're expecting, could be poles apart. And then we're sort of talking different languages at that point, because if they're expecting one thing and you're expecting another, the two are not going to meet necessarily. It also builds that confidence. You want people to feel happy and secure in their jobs, and they want to, you want them to enjoy it. I keep banging on about it, but retention is the key here. If you have a really diverse, inclusive workplace, people will enjoy it because everyone brings something different. And that brings me on to the next point, is develops connections with colleagues. Hey, yeah, we are all here to work. But actually, one of the nice things about working, especially if you work in an actual office, and it's one of the bits that I miss, is those little times when you can have a gossip, where you can take 5 minutes to have a coffee, where you can sit and have lunch and just talk about anything. One of my colleagues I used to work with when we had new people used to interrogate them on what's their favorite soup, what do they order from the Chinese, what was the last thing they watched on Netflix, and stupid, did I watch your favorite pair of shoes? Not because, well, I mean, we were really nosy, but because they're really nice, kind of neutral questions. Like, do you have a favorite soup flavor? Even if you don't, say I don't really like soup. Oh, okay. What do you like instead? What's your favorite flavor of crisps? Those sorts of things. And they sound stupid, and they are stupid. And that was kind of the point, is like you can't have bigger conversations about your life and your career and all the other big important stuff, because we share. I, as you will probably notice, I'm a big talker and I'm a big oversharer. So you kind of know my life whether you want it or not. But some people are not like that. And you can't develop a bond and you can't work well with people until you understand people. So yeah, that's a freebie. Ask people, go around today, ask people what their favorite flavor of crisps is, because it's a great debate. Mine is Thai sweet chili sensations, because I'm fancy like that. And then
20 past Charlotte.
Oh my goodness. Oh, everyone needs to stop talking about crisps. Thank you, Kirsty. Last point on there, productive. If you can get people smoothly transitioned into the work environment, what do we expect of you? What do we need from you? Do you get along with your colleagues? Can you ask some questions? Go be productive sooner. Happy people work faster. It's a nice, easy equation. Okay. How do we build that inclusion in? So, clear information from the start. No second guessing. It might feel like information overload, and some of it will be, but I've never started a job where it isn't information overload at the beginning, because you want to know what's going on. I would hate to walk into a job, sit down at my desk and be like, I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, some days there is a little bit of that, but overall, we want people to be happy in it. We might need to make adjustments from day one. It may be that people didn't tell you something, didn't admit to something, didn't want to mention something when they were first starting. And that's not uncommon. People want to get a job. People want to get a job, especially for people who maybe have a disability. They want to get a job on their own merits, not on what you think they can do, what you think that they can't do. So it might be you need to make some adjustments. And that's might be annoying if you need to get equipment or do whatever, but actually, I'm sure we can manage. Keep networks, key points of contact, give them a buddy. sounds really cheesy, but people need to know who they can ask questions to. And especially, you know, if you work in a small business, maybe you were interviewed. You know, for me, when I got the previous job, I was interviewed by the managing director. Now, I'm certainly not going to be asking my managing director really basic questions like, where are the envelopes? How do you fix the printer? You know, stupid. What file do I need to put this in when it's finished? I'm not going to be asking her those questions, but actually having a buddy, I can be like, hey, can you just tell me? When I first started working with the HR department in Clapham, I asked Kirsty a lot of stupid questions, and Kirsty was my unofficial buddy because I didn't know a lot of things. So you need somebody, and that helps it. That keeps that, and goes into the next point. It encourages those connections. It makes it easier to have a conversation with people when you aren't always like, oh, excuse me, I just need to ask a question. Make everything accessible to people. So learning materials, again, I said, I've worked with somebody who's dyslexic. They need a different screen to go on their laptop. And that really helped with them with their training. Make it easy. You know, if people need to print stuff because it's easier for them to read on a piece of paper, do it. Why are we making life hard for people? And then check in regularly. We want to make sure that the things that we set up and the things we were aiming for are going well. We're back to, maybe this is the bingo word, retention. We want people to be happy. We want to keep them in the business. So I put a final point on that one. It should be intentional. We should be including people just as standard. It shouldn't be, God, what do I need to do? Or even just assumed. We just assume that people will get on with it. We just assume, again, that's that unconscious bias. Just because I don't need anything specific to help me work doesn't mean other people don't need anything. And when you're new to a job, it is a bit hard to be like, oh, actually, can I have this? Or can I need this? It sounds, you don't want to sound demanding your first day on the job, do you? But actually, it's really important. You know, even something simple as a mouse mat that's correct because somebody's got carpal tunnel in their wrist doesn't sound like a lot. It's probably a fiver off Amazon. It'll come tomorrow. But actually, those little things are so easy to include. So, little note on workplace culture because I'm conscious of the time and I can't like to talk. So, what does the role of workplace culture? Like I mentioned at the beginning, we've all worked at places which are bad. They are toxic. They drain your energy. You wake up in the morning and you don't want to go. You're in the car maybe or about to log on at home and you're like, oh, I don't want to look. I don't want to know. And you normally, do you know what's great for? Great to trauma bond with your colleagues about how awful it is. But it's not great from a business point of view. And actually, I don't think from like in your soul, it's probably not good for you. So what we want from a supportive culture and what that looks like, we want to encourage that belonging. We want people to feel like they should be there, like they're not a number in a box, that they're not ticking exercise for diversity. You know, especially when we are employing people, we want them to feel like they are there just for being them. And, you know, they whatever they bring, that's fine. That we value the different perspectives because we're going to have that. You know, I keep using it because it's a really nice example. We've got people coming into the workforce that were born in like 2000 and something. That genuinely, they are babies in my eyes, but they're not. They are whole people who are starting their careers. And the same as we've got people the other end of the spectrum who maybe are thinking of retiring. And those are such different, you know, that's like there's potentially 3 to 4 generations of people within a workplace. And they absolutely bring different perspectives and different ways of looking at it. We want to promote, and this one's going to sound a bit fluffy and woo, but we promote psychological safety. People need to be able to talk and be themselves and feel that they are safe. You know, I work very closely with a lot of LGBTQ charities and organizations. And actually, some people have a real fear of even opening up and saying, you know, yeah, I have a partner, she's a woman, and saying, you know, people don't like to do that. They don't feel safe to say that. And that's something really hard when you can't go to work and just be you because you're worried about what people will say. So if we have that inclusive culture, people can just be them and can just bring, you know, whatever they bring to the table without worrying about it. And we create equal opportunities. So that means everybody has a fair share of everything. They get a fair shake at everything. Not every job is right for every person, but if we allow everyone to try, at least then we know whether or not they can do something. Not everybody wants to be a manager. Not everybody wants to climb the career ladder. That is not it's not on everybody's wish list for 2026. And that is also fine. We need to value what they bring just as much as what somebody who does want to climb the career ladder. And then I'm conscious of the time. So these are all, on the flip side of that, we've got the negative things that come from it, that we limit people, we don't engage with them, retention goes down, people don't want to stay, people feel excluded. It's a horrible environment. If you've ever worked anywhere where you feel like you're not in the clique and you're not in the in team, it is really vile. It's a horrible way to work. And we don't want that for people. You wouldn't want it for yourself. You don't want it for other people. And part of that comes from the top down and what you, if you are a leader or senior in your business, what you bring as well. Are you embodying that inclusivity, that everyone comes to work as themselves? And that's totally fine. As long as the work's getting done, it doesn't matter. So, a little glug of tea. Kirsty, have we got time for a glug of tea?
2 minutes.
Oh, we might finish on time. This is a miracle. I'm gonna have this one on my CV. I finished the whole webinar in time. Anyway, focus. Practical steps. So we've banged on about inclusivity, why we need it, why we want it, why we love it, why it's great. What can you actually do? What can you think about today, tomorrow, the rest of the week that you could put into place? Job adverts, really simple. Have a look at them. Imagine you are not you for a second, because sometimes we write something and I know what I'm saying, but would a stranger know what I'm saying? Would somebody, like if I pulled Joe Blogs off the street, would they know what I'm saying? So read it and then read it again and maybe give it to somebody else. Give it to somebody in a different department and just be like, can you read this? Does it all make sense? Do you get it? Is there anything that's sticking out? You may have put in there something that you didn't realize or didn't think about. Audit your recruitment process. You don't know, this doesn't have to take a long time, but just a little thought, as a little sense check of when I'm looking at people, and same with the standardized interviews and scoring. When I'm looking at people, have I got anything in my head that I'm like, oh, actually, the last person who we got was really good, so we need to do that again. And that can be just that person was over 20. They were not, they were over 25, over 30, or whatever that was. That person was, from a certain, I'm trying to be careful about what I say, that person wasn't, say, for example, Eastern European. I've seen that a lot from people. That person wasn't, whatever that person did, had a university degree, which wasn't needed. It wasn't a role that needed that. So we need to think about those things that we maybe are adding things in that are extra that we possibly just don't need. We just need more of an open mind, or even just an openness to something that is different. I'd also maybe talk to people about the onboarding experiences. And again, it doesn't need to be, it says review onboarding experiences. It sounds very formal, but actually you could grab a coffee and say, you started last year. What did you do for your onboarding? Was anything good? What was rubbish? Or what didn't really work? Did anyone ask you what your favorite flavour crisps are? Those sorts of things. What works, what doesn't, and change what you're doing based on that. If the onboarding experience for people felt a bit wishy-washy or like nobody was in charge of it, deal with that. Put something in place. Find somebody a buddy who they can ask questions to. Tell their buddy that they're going to be a buddy. That's a good one. I once worked somewhere where somebody just arrived one day and was given a person, and we're like, oh my God, I'm now in charge of a person. Why am I in charge of a person? Because their manager hadn't told them that this person was going to buddy up with them for the week. So once that awkwardness was done, we could all get on with our lives. Employee feedback. People who've been working there for donkey's years may not have had great onboarding experience, or an onboarding experience that's worth talking about. But actually, what's working well and what's not? Have they got people in their family? Have they got friends? Have they got somebody who could come and work for you that's, might not have normally applied? Think about different options. And then train managers on inclusive behaviours, because sometimes when we promote people to be a manager or employ people to be a manager, we employ them because we get them to be a manager because they're really, really good at the job that they were doing. And sometimes there is a bit of a skills gap between the job they were doing and being a manager, because being a manager is a lot of dealing with people. And I know that seems obvious, but sometimes when you're doing the do and living it, you're so busy focused on, I've got this job to do and I need to deliver these things, that we forget that we're also delivering the people. and we're training the people, and we can't bring ourselves into other people. We can't expect the same things. We can expect a certain standard, but not everyone's going to do, if you give somebody a problem to solve that's got more than one way to solve it, then, like a complex maths problem, then people are going to come at it from all different ways. So it's one of those things that not every way is wrong, they're just different. And that's not necessarily a problem. And we've got, I mentioned it before, but so the small changes you make can create a big impact. We want to be a great place to work, all of us. I don't think any of us want to be the anecdote that somebody tells to their other half or to their parents or to whoever after a hard day of like, oh, I hate it there, so and so so horrible, I can't be getting on with them, blah 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 blah. But we can make small changes, we can make little differences that feel small maybe to us but might be huge to somebody else. So that is everything for today. If you've got any questions, there's something in the box. Oh, it's just a thing. Thanks, Michelle. She's gone. Did anyone have any questions? Hopefully it was such a good webinar and you've all learned so much to take away with you that you haven't got any questions. No? Okay. No, that's cool. Okay, because there. Teeth back in. Like I said, if you do have any questions, more than happy
Charlotte,
to answer. Hello.
sorry, there's a question in the box. Any tips for using access to work?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Access to work is, for those people who don't know, it's a way of helping employees to get equipment or whatever they need to help them go to work. The problem with access to work is it's employee referrals. So it needs to come from the employee, is my understanding, to get anything from them. I think it's always good to go with a bit of a plan of what the person will need. So if that's an extra app on their phone, if that's equipment for the office, they need to have an idea. And then my understanding is, it's been a while since I've used Access to Work, but my understanding is then they put that application into Access to Work and they kind of yay or nay it. So it says, my employer's contacted them and they have just said, your employer needs to do it. This is a reasonable adjustment. That means that they're not going to fund it. That's basically what that says to me, Rachel, is that Access to Work are saying no, that it needs to be footed by the employer. Yeah, that's a bit of a hard one. Depending on what the person needs, it might be worth having a quick, much as I hate to say it, a quick go through Google or ChatGPT or something to see if there is other places or other funding available for what they need, especially again, without any confidentiality. It depends. If it's just something small, then it may be that Access to Work are saying that they need to foot the bill, but there may be other places. There are loads of different, again, depending on what this person needs, I don't want to say what's wrong with them, that's not the right phrasing at all, but depending on what their access needs are, it might be that there are other forms of funding and stuff that might be able to help. Any more? Thank you. Sorry, Rachel. I know it's a bit broad to try and help with in this sort of thing, but maybe if you want to drop us an email, I can help a bit more in depth with that. For now, it's okay. For now, there we go. So we are here to help. We always do the bit that I like the least is the little sales bit, but we can help with all of this. If you are a retained client, we can absolutely, as part of our services to you, help you with your recruitment process, looking at what you're doing, looking at maybe some ways to tweak it, looking at your onboarding. I always enjoy putting together an onboarding in collaboration with a client, because you tell me what you're already doing and I'll help add some extra bits in, and what can we tweak, how can we make it better. But we also deal with loads of other stuff. We can do all of that as pay-as-you-go service, and you can see on the list we do anything and everything to do with HR. We love to help, we love to problem solve, so there's no question too big or too small. There we go. And that's it from me. Thank you so much for attending. I always worry that there's going to be nobody who comes to these, so it's lovely when some familiar faces pop up. We are doing webinars every month throughout the year. They're a half hour-ish, depending on how much I talk, kind of guide through various topics. If you want to be on the mailing list for them, please drop the wonderful Kirsty an email. Her email address is on the screen. And like I say, if anybody also has any topics that they want us to cover, we are absolutely open to suggestions. Some of the previous stuff we've done is around long-term sick, performance management, using AI within the business. That was a really popular one. So we are open to anything and everything. Our next one, I believe, Kirsty, is also on long-term absences. So we've just done one about regular absences. We're going to do one. People ask for one specifically about how do we manage and cope with long-term absences within our business. So that's what we're doing in July. So if anybody wants to come to that, if not, that is it. Apologies as always. I have talked a lot. Hopefully there is something useful about it. And thank you very much. Oh, yeah, because we've had oh, there we go. Thank you, Kirsty. Somebody's having the slide. Lovely. Thank you. Should we start the recording as well, Kirsty? I think we are done for today. Drink my coffee.